Good afternoon. Welcome to the Education Continuation Task Force. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We have a pretty heavy agenda, so we're going to get right to it. If you'll look at your agenda, which was attached to the meeting invite, we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the reopening guidance document that the department issued on Friday. And we're going to devote tomorrow's superintendent webcast to discuss this document. We believe this will be the first of several versions. However, we wanted to go ahead and get information in the hands of school district leaders so they can begin making plans for next year. I have heard from the field that the guidance is too prescriptive, and I have heard from the field that the guidance is not prescriptive enough. So that may mean we're about in the right place. And we also have an update today on designing high quality learning experience through virtual or other methods of delivery with David Cook and Dr. Marty Park. As we know, we anticipate having to rely on possibly NTI next year in some form or fashion or some period. We want to make sure we are constantly perfecting that and other delivery models. And then finally, we have an update on CTE dual credit and industry certification completion from David Horstman. We have some information there. I think that will be beneficial for our students over the summer. We'll be able to wrap some things up that will help them in their career moving forward. So we're glad to have some partnerships with CPE, KCTCS, and KIA to make all that happen. So again, we have guiding questions on each of these agenda items. Please, I've heard from some of you that sometimes you all are reluctant to say some things out in the meeting just because it might be controversial, but this is why we have this group together. We want you to know what you're thinking. And if the department if we're thinking correctly about a lot of this guidance, we're moving very quickly, and the value we place a lot of value on the feedback from our partners and everyone in this meeting today. So, Dr. Foster, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through the reopening guidance document.
Good afternoon. I just want to take a minute before we actually look at the document to thank everyone that participated in the document. This was a cross-agency effort, and it was turned around in a pretty quick turnaround. So shout out and a big thank you to all the offices that helped contribute to this. As Kevin mentioned, there will be additional information coming out with you all on different topics and areas, and we will do a little bit deeper dive. And just so you'll know, the first three that we'll be focusing on to do a little bit of a deeper dive is alternative learning experiences, health and safety considerations, and social and emotional learning. So as Kevin mentioned earlier, we're going to discuss this during the superintendent's webinar tomorrow, and then we will regroup based on the feedback from today and tomorrow, and we'll start working on additional guidance. So at this time, I'm going to share my screen just so you can see the document. Karen, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the document is posted on the KDE COVID-19 webpage. If you haven't received a copy through the press release, so that it is available on the webpage. And as you can kind of see, what we did is at the beginning, we had the table of contents talking about how everything is lined out in the document. And the four big buckets that we focused on are health and safety for all, maintaining quality teaching and learning, support for exceptional learners, and school and district operations. And under each one of those areas, we worked on guiding questions for district and school leadership teams to use as they start to think about reopening schools. And then also on that area, we have indicated risk factors. So maybe some things that we thought of that these teams at the local level haven't thought of yet that they really need to pay additional attention to. So as we go through the document, Of course, at the very beginning, we reference Governor Beshear's healthy at work requirement, the CDC guidance from the White House, from a national organization of school psychologists as well as nurses. So we, want to make sure that everybody has access and are using the national and state level guidance documents that have been put together. And then we focus on the 5 areas that we think each team should have. And one of the things that we mentioned last week on the superintendent's webinar, and we will continue to mention, is that we think that each reopening team at the school and district level need to make sure that you include people from public health. And there also needs to be someone at the district level that is on that team that's working directly with public health. But the 5 areas that we focus on is identifying a healthy at work officer, establishing a healthy at work communications plan, making sure that you have a plan to educate and train your employees, establish contact tracing protocols, and we're seeing this more and more in the news as we move forward, and then establish calendar, enrollment, and attendance guidelines. And as we've shared with you all previously, the 3 models that the governor has asked us to think about in reopening would be focusing around an early opening. Maybe schools would go back, if they typically go back mid-August, they would start maybe mid-July. The traditional opening, following the normal calendar that you typically follow, or a late opening. So we give a description of those 3 types of openings, and then something that we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow on the superintendent's webcast that we didn't talk about last time is being prepared to shut down after you've started the school year. There may be a spike in the fall where you may get August and September in, and the cases increase in the fall, and we would have to shut down or move to NTI during, maybe the month of October or November. So we'll talk a little bit more tomorrow about intermittent closures as well. And then there's information here about different types of schedules that a school could adopt. And what we're trying to do through guidance is do just that. Find scenarios and situations and put them in the guidance document that each local team would have access to kind of help them determine what meets the needs of their school district. So we have some different models listed. And then we go into the actual framework, and each section is put together the exact same way. And so you can see the first section in the document is health and safety for all. And then we go into the guiding questions that district and school team should think about when developing their reopening plan. And then the risk factors. And so we have that format through all 4. And I will say that I think when we first gathered all the information from the different offices, we had over 500 questions. And so Dr. Matthew Courtney, I believe he's on here today. He was the person that put this document together. And so he was able to go through and take those 500 questions and take the repeats out and put this in a very easy to use document. So really appreciate all his help. You can see this next category, maintaining quality teaching and learning. And once again, you have the guiding questions and you have your risk factors. Then the third section, supporting exceptional learners. It's set up just the exact same way. And then the final section, school and district operations. So I will say that we did share this document with public health. And received some feedback from them that we incorporated into our document. And we continue to meet with public health regularly. And I know that they are working on some specific guidance that they plan to release, I believe this week, more around the safety and the health aspect of reopening. So at this time, I will turn it back over to Karen, and we can see if there are any specific questions that we need to address at this time, or if we're going to save those to the end.
Yeah, we can take questions now. Again, the guiding question is, what concerns are you hearing about the reopening of schools? And I see Nancy Hutchinson wrote in, many of my superintendents have concerns. What about PPE? Is this required for students and adults? How can the schools do gym, recess? If schools have lunch in room, does this mean teachers will not be allowed duty-free lunch?
So I'm hoping Robin Kinney and Kay Kennedy are on here as well today to help me field some of these questions. I will tell you that these are the type of questions that Nancy has submitted that we are working on getting responses to from public health. We do know that there is an issue with PPE and the access to that. And they are working on guidance about who would have to have access to PPE, when it would have to be worn. Kay or Robin, do you want to share anything additional about the conversations you've had with public health?
Kelly, I'm not seeing either of them in the participant list.
Yes, this is Kay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So a couple things I'd like to mention. First of all is what's important, I think, from a planning perspective is to identify the different types of PPE that as a school district you will need. Everything from masks to gloves to protective equipment that maybe your cafeteria workers might need to use. And then the procurement of those can be done hopefully in a way that will allow us to take advantage of bulk pricing, either through the co-ops or state price contracts, however that works out. But an important thing to do is to recognize from the school district perspective, what is that need? And it does get down to the school and almost to the classroom level. So just understanding what the need is step one. The other questions on here in terms of spacing requirements, and we call those capacity requirements, we are encouraging school districts to work with the local health officials to determine what is the required capacity in different types of spaces in the school building. And in fact, if you look at the governor's guidance, it's important to, I think, take a special look at the areas where people congregate and make some decision about whether or not you're going to try to manage those as a school administrator. So it's a very tough question on that. And I see Nancy ask about gym and lunch in the room and those kinds of things. Those are exactly things that we need the school administrators, school and district administrators to be thinking about in conjunction with local health department officials to determine the best approach in each given situation.
Kelly, there's another comment in here about using the word ensure in the document. Could that be changed to how will districts help provide as opposed to ensure, so that it's not seen as a law or creating legal rights or duties?
I see Eric's comment. Yes, thank you.
And then we've got from Amy Razor. I know you have responded about the child care guidance and opening date of June 15th. However, questions still exist due to conflict of the school date of June 30th. If a daycare is within a school, which guidance does KDE advise them to follow? Kay, is that your question for you?
Actually, we asked this question to public health, and the response that they sent us was that, basically, even if the daycare was in your school and schools were closed through June 30th, they needed to go ahead and follow the daycare guidelines so they could reopen a daycare in their school building on June 15th. So I don't know if anyone from our legal office is on the call and they want to, provide guidance if we think they should do that, even though schools are closed through June 30th.
I think Todd's on here. Todd, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Kelly, I'm on the call. Will you repeat the question?
Sure. The question that came in actually from the Northern Kentucky Co-op from a superintendent was that, the governor has announced that schools are closed through June 30th, and some of our school buildings have daycares operated out of them that are not part of that local district. And so the question we submitted to public health was, can a daycare in a school building open on June 15th? Because that's when the governor said they, could open up, even though the school building is technically closed till June 30th. And so the guidance we received over the weekend was, yes, they could go ahead and open that daycare on June 15th. However, I think some local districts are a little bit hesitant to reopen the daycares in their buildings.
So just kind of going off the fly here based on that question, again, I can't provide legal advice to any school districts, but it seems to me that the issue of school closure is a closure of in-person classes, which is separate from the district having some arrangement to operate a daycare facility. If public health through the governor's office has indicated that that's permissible to do, then it seems whether or not the district is going to follow through with that is a matter of their relationship with the individuals who are running that daycare facility. That's something that they need to determine on an individual basis, whether or not they're going to move forward with opening that building for that use.
Thanks, Todd. Stephen Pruitt has a hand raised. Stephen?
I just had to unmute. I don't have anything in particular to add here, except just to say that Kelly and I used to laugh when I was commissioner about how we got tired of other states stealing our stuff because it was so good. And I just want to give kudos to Commissioner Brown and to Kelly and to the whole staff. We actually in our task force, y'all don't know it yet, but we're going to ask y'all to talk about this on Thursday. But it's nice to see why Kentucky always leads the way, because they always do such a great job. So there's obviously things that need to be worked out and tinkered with, but I just wanted to say kudos to everybody. Very well done. As usual, you made us proud.
Dr. Pruitt, thank you. And this document is a result of several things going on at once. We're obviously participating in the SREB task force, and a lot of the discussion and the items we learned from there incorporated into this document, even though SREB hasn't fully completed that work yet. We're working with CCSSO, the work of the group, this task force right now as a result, and also independent conversations we've had, and working with public health. And I don't want to throw cold water on anything, but there's some comments about that this is overwhelming, and it is overwhelming because of the magnitude of what we're doing. And we're educate and we'll be trying to educate and keep safe over 600,000 kids this fall, just as we've done this semester. It is overwhelming, but this is not even the public health side yet. The public health guidance on all the things that Nancy talks about, the cafeterias, the gyms, all the specific things. We've got a little sneak peek of it, and it's going to be a heavy lift, and rightly so, because of what we're dealing with and the unknowns that are still out there. So we wanted to get this guidance out now, because we have to start planning for next year, and districts need to start planning for several scenarios. We've received a lot of questions about the discussion we've had over the last few weeks about the early date, the traditional start date, and the late. Those are all still in play. Starting in July is not a mandate. It was simply the governor and the commissioner and the department wanting everybody to be aware that, hey, if you all think that you can meet the standards and you can get back in, and the course of the virus is such that you can go in July, we have your back. We support you going in late July. We'll also support you going in late October or right after Labor Day if the environment and the calendar that the virus will put us on allows it. And so that's why we want everybody thinking of all these options. And then as we go forward the next weeks and months, we're going to be layering in the additional details from public health, from the additional work that SREB is going to be doing. All this will continue to be layered in to this document in various versions to complete that plan and answer all those specific questions way down into the weeds. And Rhonda, you're completely right. It is overwhelming. I think we are up to the task, though. You had a question or a comment about coordination. I really see our co-ops, if they don't, they are also resource strapped. I understand that, but they also provide a great avenue at very little cost for districts just to talk to one another. And so a lot of that coordination and can be done through just having a co-op meeting and having those discussions and having the partner groups having discussions like we're having today. So I want to give you just a little bit of a background about our thought process, how this document got developed, what to expect in the future.
And Commissioner Brown, if I could just add, this is Stephen again. I would just make clear to everybody too, it is overwhelming, but you know what? It probably should be. We've been sort of jokingly talking about at SREB that it's sort of like peeling a rotting onion, because you don't just have layers, you have things that are now mushed up across the layers. And maybe it's about time the public sees that education's not so easy, and education's not something that can just be done by a checklist. If anything, I think what the COVID-19 pandemic has done is it's opened a lot of eyes to what public education is dealing with every day. So yeah, it's a lot. It's overwhelming. Like Commissioner said, this is just one facet of it for us on our end. We think we're going to be working on this probably for the next 3-4 months, and having different pieces, because every time we get to one piece, there's a roadblock that says, actually, you got to address these 3 others first. So I would just say, education is not rocket science, because rocket science is a whole lot easier. Speaking as a chemist, I guess, but the point is, this is hard. And I think it's probably good for the public to know it's hard, and it's good for them to know that public education is the best thing going, but it's also the thing that there's a reason why we just can't fix everything, quote unquote, without having some real conversation about it. So again, just kudos to all of you on this, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and how much you're able to inform the conversations going on regionally.
Karen, are you may be muted.
Well, yeah, I just gave a great introduction to our next speakers. Sorry, y'all missed it. Okay, next up we have designing high quality learning experiences regardless of delivery model. And presenting for us on that topic is David Cook and Marty Park. So I'll hand it over to David.
Thank you, Karen. And we also have Misty Higgins with us, who is with the Office of Teaching and Learning. She was having some internet problems, so I'm not sure if she's actually with us, but she's the 3rd member of our team. And just to give you a little background, an opening background, Marty's going to share a little bit more with you before we really jump into getting your feedback. We've had a great conversation already today about all of the multiple factors that must be addressed in reopening school. One of the things that we've been working on here, as we've thought through NTI and all the other facets of the digital learning that's been going on, as well as teacher preparation for all of this situation, is what does PD look like, professional learning look like for teachers and leaders through the course of the summer and the fall related to remote learning, which is part of our guidance for both the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund and the ESSER funds, the funds that are going out to districts. So we've spent some time thinking about that. And one of the things we've learned from the COVID closure and the use of NTI, as is not a surprise to everyone, is that teachers weren't prepared for the use of NTI, and not only not prepared for NTI itself, but they weren't prepared for the ability to transition their learning plans from a more traditional classroom setting to digital methods. And so it's, after a lot of discussion here, we realize that that's probably one of the biggest areas that teachers and leaders need assistance and support with as we move through the summer and into the fall. And that is being able to develop and design your instructional materials, your learning design, if you will, not the content of it, but how you design it and how you present it, needs to be much more flexible than it has been for a lot of our teachers before the closure moving forward, because there are going to be different scenarios that they may come across. In-person instruction, NTI instruction, but also hybrids of that. So there needs to be a much better, much greater thought process by teachers as to what's the best way to design my instruction so it can be transitioned to these various models seamlessly without, oh, I got to rewrite that because it was designed for digital and I'm doing face-to-face or vice versa. So what happens when you do that is students and teachers face a lot of confusion, and we want that confusion and those sort of gaps or duplications that could occur either direction with how instruction is designed could go away. What we learned in best practice over the course of NTI is that when teachers design things in a method that allows for them either to be done while they're standing in front of the students in the classroom, or whether they're using digital methods like that happen during NTI, the students are better off if all of that looks the same, regardless of whether it's a regular school day or not. And it shouldn't be something that teachers have to rethink what their lessons are going to look like on a non-face-to-face situation. So I'm going to turn it over to Marty. You have the guiding question in the agenda. That's where we're going to head later on, but Marty's going to share a little bit more about what we think about when we're trying to design high quality, effective instruction regardless of delivery method.
Thank you, David. Actually, Misty looks like she is in. Misty, I wanted to pull you in first as a leader in our professional learning space as well, working with Dr. Ellis and Krista Hall. Misty, were you able to join us?
Yeah, can you hear me on my phone? Okay.
Absolutely. I know you're there's a storm at your house right now.
Yes, the storm just rolled through and knocked out the internet, but I was able to call in. Yeah, one of the things that I just wanted to share quickly is, I've had the opportunity over the last month or so to be in on different conversations with some of our co-ops as well as with some of our teachers in their experiences and what they're starting to see as needs around professional learning. On a co-op call last week, one of the things that we were hearing is teachers were struggling with how did formative assessment, how does that work, and how does best practice with that apply to the virtual setting, as well as how do they give effective feedback through a virtual setting. And so that was one of the things teachers said they were kind of struggling with throughout this extended remote learning. And then in addition, in conversations with teachers reflecting on lessons learned, we know that many of them are already thinking of how they need to much more intentionally I think embed and integrate technology in the regular classroom so that as they maybe go back and forth between remote learning and the classroom, that the students are able to more seamlessly do that and the teachers themselves are more seamlessly able to do that. And so some of what we're hearing in conversations is this need of teachers to see how best practice around assessment, specifically formative and feedback, how does that transfer between the settings in a way that's effective for everyone.
Thank you, Misty. This is, as David also shared, this has been a nice collaborative work across several offices at the agency, at the Department of Ed, as well as in the field and with our co-ops and other partners. And this is a conversation in terms of, I'm going to bring it back to this very timely topic of digital learning. And when we mention digital learning, we also can pull in online, virtual, distant, remote learning strategies. And I think the intentional point is all about learning. It's important for us to focus on learning experiences and how they're designed. So I wanted to just share briefly before we get into some guiding questions, because the most important part of this is to engage in a conversation, figure out this big point for us, which is what is most helpful in terms of professional learning. And if digital and distance-based strategies are something that are very timely and important right now, which they are, and they're proving to, it's important to really understand that we've been approaching what we have referred to as digital readiness for over a decade, and it's digital readiness is actually tied into our KETS master plan, and it has been since the inception of the KETS master plan. But over 6 or 7 years ago, we shifted from just like thinking about technologies to trying to really understand and grab a hold of what our students and teachers are doing with the technologies. And that's where we are today, and that's important to, I think, understand. I'm going to share my screen just briefly. This is a part of a professional learning series that our team has been engaged in with over some time. And so just getting to the point of trying to boil it all down to these 4 digital strategies that can be most helpful. And that's understanding what access at home looks like. That's digital, a digital device, definitely. This consistency with a learning manager becomes really important. What that looks like across from district, from a district by district perspective, but also by school, understanding the people that are involved and getting at digital strategies to help most in terms of professional learning tied to using technologies or maximizing the use of our digital tools and resources. And then understanding, which is David and Misty both pushed on, is the idea of these digital learning experiences and how they're most helpful, whether that's from a formative approach, from a timely feedback perspective. We often think about these in terms of a digital workflow. And so I wanted to share briefly that from a learning management system perspective, we know what our schools and districts are using. It's important to identify a learning management strategy. These are ideas of helping our teachers structure learning in a way that makes sense for students, in a way that's comfortable, in a way that can extend beyond, as David mentioned, and we've been working through for quite some time now, is these are not just things that you do on remote days or on NTI days. These are ideas that help us, really start to seamlessly move into a blended strategy, and that's, both traditional methods as well as digital methods. And so we know that 150 school districts right now report having a district-wide learning management system strategy. That's awesome. We need to do that. And so our top 3 learning management systems right now are Google Classroom, Edgenuity, and Schoology. That's interesting for us, but probably most important from a professional learning perspective is our digital learning coach strategy. We have a digital learning coach network, which I actually shared on the very first meetup a little bit about that network. And right now we have almost 200 or so full-time or part-time district level identified digital learning coaches. That strategy is all about scaling and sustainability of digital learning coach roles across all of our, with all of our teachers across all grade levels. And so that strategy itself is extremely important. We actually have a digital learning coach summit that was already planned that we're turning into a virtual summit right now this summer, and we have over 100 school district and school level folks participating in, so that we can scale out this work to better integrate technologies. And we always are going to refer to maximizing the effective use of technologies. And so it's really important for us to understand what's most helpful. And in terms of professional learning, I did want to mention and just quickly get into an engagement conversation with our our main guiding question right now, which is, what do teachers and leaders need most to be prepared for the possibilities of varying instructional delivery models? What do we need most? We have on-demand designs. Our Office of Teaching and Learning has some awesome on-demand learning experiences already set up, but we also know that we need live, structured events this summer that, like I mentioned, that are already planned, and we want to accelerate. So I want to turn it over and open up the guiding question to get some feedback on what we think we need most from a professional learning experience, and maybe it's just confirmation that we're definitely on the right track. And if you want to, just like the other guy, if you want to chat or unmute your mic, that's great too.
And there is a new feature in our Teams where you can raise your hand now, as Stephen did earlier. So if you click anywhere and you see that little bar that comes up towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little hand, and that's how you can raise your hand.
So that's not the high five, right, Karen? That's the raise.
No, it's not a high five.
I did want to mention, and it's very timely again, at our June board meeting, will be the first reading of our new Kentucky Academic Standards for Technology. The reason I point that out, number one, it's extremely timely, but it's important to understand that these are not technology standards that are all about how to use technologies. It's not what buttons to click and things like that. We're completely modernizing and transitioning into transforming learning experiences through the use of technologies. And so it's important to understand from a professional learning perspective that we're using technologies as tools to learn and for learning, not spending time learning, I refer to what button to click kind of tool trainings. We're far from that.
Thanks, Marty. What feedback do you all have out there? It's quiet. Okay, I've got something here from David Johnson. There's been a lot of conversation about digital learning, but districts report that about 20% of students do not have internet access. What's being done to consider how to address those needs?
And that's a great question. As David Cook mentioned earlier, and I know David Couch has responded to similar questions in the past several weeks as well. Our most vital group of students that do not have internet access at home remains important. We believe that's, depending on the district, that's somewhere between 8 to 15% of students who do not have internet access at home, and that is definitely number one, David. That is definitely something that we need to know. And so many of our districts, and that number is above half, have a strategic way to know which students do not have internet access at home and which students do. And so that's step one that we will continue to coach on. And once you understand which students do not have internet access at home, then formulating a game plan around that. And I'll bring it back to something that David Cook mentioned early on, is the design of the learning experience to make sure that we, instead of reverse designing, so that we create something from an instructional perspective and then find a way to get that digital, we design it up front so that then it's just a delivery method perspective. And we do have some great models right now from our school districts, but I think, just to point out, understanding which students do not have internet access at home is always going to be a vital step.
And Marty, I would add to that, just kind of to float along with what you just said, is by designing it forward thinking rather than reverse designing the instruction, when we do have situations, which we know we're going to have because we have kids without internet access, as David Johnson is mentioning. We also have kids that are homeless. We have kids that are transient. We're going to need an effective way to give them the materials. And if you design it digitally, it's a whole lot easier to transition it into something that's on a piece of paper than the other way around. It just makes more sense for our professional learning experiences for our teachers this summer to be thinking forwardly about how you design, and that the digital opportunity opens up all the delivery options, whereas a paper or starting from something that you're writing on paper doesn't automatically give you those other options open to you.
Well said. And I also want to address Nancy Hutchinson's point, and that's an extreme point that, you know, when we design learning experiences through digital means, there's just such a huge opportunity to do that well. And so, for example, Nancy, directly to your point, is if I have students at home as well who are successfully in week number 6 or 7 of NTI, and there's some great digital exchange, but there's also an opportunity to just blast out a bunch of digital, what we would really think about as just substitution based things, or there's inconsistencies. For example, if one student has to jump into 3 or 4 different systems in order to try to figure out what they're doing, that student would probably opt for paper. And so there's such a great opportunity in the design from a professional learning perspective, from an instructional design, and trying to, you know, really get at a streamlined approach to what helps in terms of digital learning, and then what adds to confusion and chaos, and, you know, and I think that's such a strong point.
Melissa was asking, how do we collectively work together as a state to provide equitable access for all students and staff? You got that figured out, Marty?
Yeah, as I think Dr. Pruitt mentioned earlier, these are the, you know, awesome challenges of our time. I think number one, we have to really know what the need is, and in what areas with what students. Then we can design, you know, start working collectively. I think, you know, we cite some awesome community practices of trying to solve some of this. And there's going to be different levels of access right now. We do believe that in terms of timely feedback in an all remote environment or scenario, that, you know, students who, and I don't think there's no debate or no arguing that students with internet access at home have an extreme advantage over those who do not, in terms of timely feedback with teachers and, you know, that learning design. And so trying to get to what that looks like for all students, and understanding that there are going to be students who may have to drive to a location and sync up. Not ideal at all, but as we continue to work through those challenges, you know, that's definitely where attention has got to be, district by district and community by community.
Marty, this is David Couch, and I know you know from our discussions that there are a variety of techniques that, with GEARS money and ESSER money, that districts can address the low-income students. They can use a portion of that money, and we've been studying this for a little bit, and we're going to have a webcast with all the district ed tech leaders and CIOs to get a better feel for this tomorrow. As Marty said, Kentucky has actually tracked this much better than the other 49 states about just not what we have in our schools, but our homes, which I really was surprised that the other 49 states had not been closely looking at this. So our numbers we feel pretty good about, but obviously poverty is a sliding scale right now. So part of it is, you know, how do we address the students immediately without having to worry about, you know, a physical wire coming to the last mile wire coming to their home, which may take a long time, 5-10 years. It's telling how long it will take to reach every home in Kentucky with a last mile connection. However, there are solutions out there that do it almost instantaneously and reach 99% of Kentucky. And this is the hotspots that you've seen used in rural parts and the rural farm that we have in Breathitt County to a variety of other places. And so districts are right now, and that's one of the options we're talking about is with the ESSER money, with the GEERS money, with also other types of district money, what is the way to reach the last mile of this percentage, as Marty says, this somewhere between 8 and 15% of the students, and then we know at least half of that 8 to 15%, this is a poverty issue. Even like in Johnson County where I grew up, is they have fiber throughout that county, and it's not an access issue, it's an affordability. You can see the difference, and we see it also in Louisville, is they have multiple options available, and the percentage is the same as it is, or really close to the same as it is in Johnson County. So it's just not they don't have it, it's an affordability piece. And so that's the piece that districts will be taking a look at with the funds that they've been allocated is, are they going to get, and provide and pay for that last mile connection to the students with those funds? And what does that mean in the long term to start going down that path? Obviously, we understand from what Marty and David are talking about the real advantages of delivering digitally, but there are ways that we don't have to wait a long time, and there are solutions there that hit those homes very quickly, especially for the low-income homes. Thanks for letting me interject there, Marty.
That's a perfect interjection. I do want to respond. Has there been considerations of how to help districts evaluate the effectiveness or impact of current NTI program? I think, David Cook, that's a great question for you. I know that's been a part of your work for a while. I wanted to kind of take that question though, and really push on briefly. And Misty will know where I'm coming from here. Krista Hall and Dr. Ellis will have heard us talk about this for quite some time. But when we use digital tools and resources, there's this exactly to that part of the question, which is evaluating the effectiveness. And so, in other words, we've come across, and we all know where we purchase maybe something that we think is going to help, but we don't really understand the full adoption. And so, one of the big pieces that we're continuing to work on district by district, and we have some awesome pilot work right now, but it's trying to understand what that looks like. And we have that in really 3 different tiers. We have that in 3 different tiers. Number 1, the first tier is understanding the adoption, which students are using the tools and resources that are available. The second tier up is understanding the total cost of ownership. And so, for example, if our districts purchase X number of licensing for whatever math software, and trying to understand, that are only 3% of students actually using that? And if not, then let's do a quick reroute or a change of course. And then the third tier up is understanding the impact. Is it making a difference or not? And so we have some great opportunity in front of us for that. And we're strongly pushing on not moving forward and until we have those pieces as a part of the plan. At least those first 2 tiers of just understanding who's using and adopting the tools and resources or not, especially at home. In other words, we know today that some of our students who have internet access at home are not engaging for some reason or another, and so we need to provide additional opportunity around that, and that second tier of total cost of ownership is important as well. So David Cook, the bigger part of evaluating effectiveness over the current NTI program is obviously something you've been working on for a while.
Right. So we do that generally with NTI. We are planning to do some of that here as we've kind of wound down the summer, David. And it also, but I also want to remind us, just what Marty just said, NTI is the function that allows you to do remote learning on days when you can't go to school. The idea is that the effectiveness measures that Marty and his team have looked at for a long time some of those questions have already been asked quite a bit. So there's a little bit of a blurring of digital learning in general, and then we talk about NTI as a program that occurs on certain days. But as we think about the way school might reopen in the fall, we have to think about, I think the digital learning effectiveness is what's important for districts. How effective are they in providing really high quality instruction that can be delivered both digitally and in person is what we really need to be effective about. The pieces that our team is going to look at are more of those things that we also found to be challenges during the COVID closure, which have to do with teachers and kids, and the fact you couldn't get materials back and forth for kids, or connection points with teachers, all of the other feeding kids, all of the other, how does staff get to work, and all of that. Those are things we want to make sure people are effective with. I will say this, and we are getting in new NTI applications from districts who just started with NTI because of the COVID closure, and their applications are phenomenal. And it's because they have looked at what they've been doing for the last 2 months and have that advantage of other people who may have applied for NTI the first time before. They know what they did and didn't do that worked. So they're almost doing self-assessments of their own effectiveness at providing NTI coverage. I also wanted to really quickly, Marty, go back up to, I think it was Martin. Let me find it. There it is. Martin Munson, his question about elementary schools. And I've been quite impressed. We've had a lot of, as you know, a lot of conversations with teachers, with our teacher advisory council, with other smaller groups of teachers, as Misty and Marty have both pointed out. I've been really impressed with our elementary teachers, particularly a couple of kindergarten teachers who have really created high quality instructional ideas for their really young kiddos, using technology and knowing that it had to be obviously developmentally appropriate. And they knew that, you know, in many of those cases, those kids probably were working independently. So, but teachers also have the opportunity to let the kid work on the work and go in through the other side and interact either by email or by phone with parents to say, hey, next time your kid has their iPad in front of them or whatever, let's try this. So to us, it's all about figuring out and learning, which is what thousands and thousands of teachers have done in the last 2 months in such a fast way. We're going to be flooded all summer with greater and greater high quality digital learning experiences that teachers have had during this time.
This is a great capture of conversation. David, I also wanted to mention Mary's question about districts might think about identifying students without internet access and prioritizing bringing them on site. Absolutely, that is captured in the first round of reopening schools guidance that Dr. Foster shared. That I think it's on page 5 or 6. That's captured as one of the scenarios that could make sense, and so definitely something to try to design around.
I did want to hit something on Marty, is that the average is not 20%, and we have a link on our website that can help folks with. We've gone into great detail studying this, and also the students with smartphones with internet access. So it's not 20%. We know that very factually, it's not that high. And as we said, it's between the 18 to 15%. And I want to make sure some of that's poverty, some of that is they could afford it, but they don't have it. So that's why we're making at least half of those parents aware of where you can go buy a hotspot to get access to your home, so you're not waiting 5, 10, 20 years for an actual physical wire to come by your house. Called the last mile. We call it the last mile wire.
And David, that's 8 to 15%.
Yeah. So this is actually the farm where I grew up when I was young, and this is where we use a hotspot service. But also at this place is they've also recently put a wired connection to it, and you could also get satellite here. So we had 3 different options. Satellite was the least preferred, but I can tell you how well the hotspots work. Not one hotspot provider works across the entire state. For this one here in Eastern Kentucky and Breathitt County, is this Verizon and Sprint. not AT&T, but AT&T's works in other parts of the state. So it's not one single provider. So folks ought to get very familiar with their provider and their hotspot service. Is actually a device. You can get one for your phone as well, but this is actually a physical device.
Thanks, David. So David Johnson was saying that his percentages shared were based on estimates provided by individual districts.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is you take a look at numbers, and this is important, is you will see numbers saying X percent of your community is connected. Well, we found in studying this and tracking it for at least 15 years, the percentage of the homes with K-12 of K-12 student with internet access is typically much higher than the regular general community. And this is because those parents are finding a way to connect them. Whereas, like when my grandparents lived at this farm,
Kevin for me.
there was not near the interest of them of actually putting a high-speed connection there.
I got knocked off.
So I'm not sure who's talking there, but so there's a different ways that you can connect them. So if you have any kind of questions about that, let me know.
I think, Karen, I think John Akers has a few questions or comments. I think he got knocked off the actual Teams, but he's on the call on the phone.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. I apologize. Rob just texted me, just told me to mute my phone. I thought I had it muted. My bad on that. Just a couple of quick items real quick. I've been in contact with Max Wise and Joe Burks on some issues that a couple of principals called us on recently about if and when we have a new form of school instruction going on, how we're going to handle the emergency drills issues. And I'm not a fan of massive, evacuation drills at this point in time. So I'm advocating block drills where, for example, if my civics class, and I'm still teaching here, I want to take my class out for a fire drill by itself, by my class, by myself, so to speak, and then come back in so the kids know where to go, the routes to go out, the routes to come back in. Same thing for a severe weather drill. I will take them out to the hallway, show them where they're supposed to be, they'll bring them back in. Then each class does them separately. That's what we call kind of block drill. Lockdown drills and earthquake drills traditionally are done in the classrooms. And so I've forwarded this on to Max and to Joe Burke saying, guys, do you think this would address the intent of the law? And they're giving me a thumbs up on this, but they're going to run it up and down their ladders over there at LRC just to be sure everything's okay at that. But that's some kind of conversation we're having out there. And one other thing, too, I want to mention is that I'm hearing quite a bit of chatter from principals saying that, what are we going to do about if we have schools open up and the kids aren't on the buses and their parents are going to be bringing them to school? How are we going to handle the traffic conditions and the congestion and things like that? And so those are some more items that need to be out on the chopping block as far as talking is concerned. I've got consultants that are really well trained in parking lot issues and things like that and traffic control that can be of assistance. And so we'll be pushing that out a little bit later down the road to these principals once they kind of get a feel for what they're going to do next year and see what we can do to help them out. But those are two things, Kevin, that I just wanted to mention real quick. And I've been just a quick kudos to all of you all. I've been listening to these calls for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm just totally impressed with what every one of you are all doing and your dedication on this. So from the cheap seats here and this old veteran educator here, thank you so very much for what you guys are doing.
Thank you, John. Both very good points. Kelly, if you could, if we haven't already, make sure we are linking over to John's shop at some point in that. I think we already are doing that in the COVID page, but particularly in the guidance document in a future version when we're drilling down into some of those like drill issues and the other issues that John brought up, like parking.
All right, good feedback. I think we're ready to move on to our last agenda item. And that is CTE dual credit and industry certification completion. David Horseman is our speaker on this. And the guiding question is, what considerations do you think are appropriate for lab-based dual credit next year? David?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Karen. I'm on my phone because my internet has been going up and down on my laptop this afternoon. So I'll just share it with you, and I'll turn my camera off here while I'm discussing it with you. We've been working with some of our partners, and I want to take this opportunity to really thank Dr. Boxer from KCTCS, Eugene Hutchins from Kia, and Dr. Aaron Thompson from CPE. We've had a lot of questions from our superintendents and folks in the field. And we wanted to make sure that we had some good answers for you folks moving forward. So we're looking to try to help what's going on with the lab-based completion of industry certifications, and most especially the dual credit lab courses. So we've worked with our partners and come up with some plans where KCTCS has stepped up to the plate, and they're offering their facilities and instructors to help us begin that in-person lab experience to complete dual credit courses. So the guidance for this is that, number one, our goal is to get these students done before June the 30th. First of all, the post-secondary institution will have to obtain notification from the Council on Post-Secondary Education that the governor has authorized in-person coursework for students to resume. Now, in KCTCS, some of you may have been contacted even Friday that this work might be starting already and be opening, but they will. We will not be the first priority. They have their own students to start with, and then they'll begin with their seniors. The post-secondary institution, then, following the governor's healthy work reopening protocols and any applicable industry-specific guidance issued by the governor's office. The students who return for assessment and dual credit opportunities are going to be provided with appropriate protective equipment, PPE. And in this case, KCTCS is talking about if they don't have masks, they will be provided masks. There's other PPE that students use in their labs, like welding helmets and those kind of things, that probably will not be available. There's evidence also that there's willingness from the parent and the student to participate in in-person coursework. Some students may have decided not to do this. It's not mandatory, but if they do, we want this option available. So if the student's 18 or older, we're going to request that the student at least give notice to parent or their guardian that they're going to do this. If the student's under 18 years of age, the parent and guardian will be provided with a waiver for the parents to sign permission for them to go on the KCTS campus and be taught by the KCTCS instructor. And we realize that there's a lot of coordination that will have to go on between the high school teacher, the adjunct there at the technical center or high school, and the current instructor to make sure that they know where the students are and what labs need to be called up. So this piece is for the class of 2020 seniors only. And there's still some moving parts going on right now as we speak. And there will be the dual credit coordinators at each of the 16 colleges will be reaching out to the high school teachers and principals to start getting names of students that want to participate. As action that we're working on with industry certification and other students is completion at a secondary school. Now, requirements for students returning to secondary facilities, and we're thinking that it may be after June 30 before we can start, if we start. So the district or the area technology center will obtain notification from KDE that the governor had authorized in-person coursework for the students to resume. And if and when that occurs, then they'll be following the governor's Healthy at Work reopening protocols and any applicable industry-specific guidance issued by the governor's office. Students return for the dual credit opportunities and assessments for industry certifications will be provided with the appropriate PPE, and the school district or the ATC will coordinate with the local Department of Public Health representatives concerning that reopening protocol plan in that area. And there again, there has to be evidence of student willingness and parent guardian approval to participate in in-person coursework or to complete the industry certifications and assessments. Again, if the student's under 18, they'll need parent permission as a requirement. And if they're above 18 or older, we would ask that they give notice to the parents. And these limitation conditions, it's strongly advised that districts and ATCs grant the graduating seniors from the class of 2020 priority in terms of these opportunities to complete the lab-based dual credit coursework and industry certification. And as Dr. Pruitt said earlier today, this is one of those messy onions. I want to talk specifically now about Medicaid nurse aid or the state registered nurse aid assessment. Now, this is controlled by the Department of Medicaid Services, and they've advised that they're going to temporarily permit the completion of the supervised clinical experience, which is 16 hours, normally occurs in a long-term care facility. But they're going to allow that to occur within a hospital setting or a simulated clinical environment now. And so it's the responsibility of the training provider to verify the completion of these clinical hours, whether it's within a hospital or a simulated facility, and then retain the documentation for the testing purposes. And then the training provider must self-attest that the individual providing clinical oversight meets the instructor's qualifications. They have to be an RN or an LPN. And so when such hours are completed within a hospital facility, the following conditions should be met. Before they can do anything in a medical facility, they have to provide evidence of a signed M&A facility agreement, obtain evidence of the student's willingness and the parents' approval to participate. And in the 18 and over and 18 and under guidance applies here as it does in the others. And so after the clinical experience has been taken care of, then KCTCS has several testing sites around the state that are available for the students to complete their M&A testing. So the qualified instructor has to complete the COVID-19 testing roster and schedule a testing appointment with the appropriate facility. So I know I've said a whole lot. We're going to be checking with our partners one more time before we send this guidance out tomorrow in writing. But we feel like that this is very close to being final. And we've got some challenges that we wanted to run by you today with our guiding question. Is that seeing the challenges that we've met up to this point, what do we need to consider in the fall when we start preparing for enrolling in these lab-based CTE dual credit courses? So if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer those or continue with our guided question.
Thanks, David. The question again is, what considerations do you think are appropriate for lab-based dual credit next year? John Settle, it appears that you are trying to share your screen, even though it's a black screen. So if you could try to unshare, that would be helpful.
While we're waiting for some questions or comments, I want to also thank again our partners at KCTCS, CPE, and KIA for their willingness to be creative and work through these issues to ensure kids get these experiences. Particularly KCTCS opening their facilities. It's much easier for them. Well, it's not easy for them, but we thought best to the first chance at this for us to go with their offer of opening 16 of their facilities as opposed to opening 52 of ours. So using their labs going to be very helpful. Karen, there are also some questions right at the tail end, right when you were introducing David, about from Eric Kennedy and some others about the reminding us that just part of the problem is the internet access, and it's also the issue of students and then their caregivers who have difficulty sometimes utilizing the technology, the devices, and the access. And that needs to be a part of the conversation and strategy moving forward to, and David, I think you have some good analogies for those types of issues. And always are warning us at KDE about before you buy something, make sure you have the ability to support it. And that goes with that. Needing to make sure we have good training and professional development, but also knowing that students are coming home to differing levels of education of parents too, and the ability of parents having the time to assist them as well is a problem.
Kevin, Tanya Crum has raised her hand from KET. Tanya, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
You know, that was an accident, and I apologize. I have something to share, but I'll share it later when it's on point. Sorry.
Okay.
We also had some comments from 2 co-op directors about co-ops having the ability to work on the hotspot issue. Anything else on any of the issues we've discussed today? Anything else, particularly on the continuing guidance, or education continuation, the reopening guidance, after you've had some time to think? The floor is open. Do one of the 2 of the co-op directors that talked about the hotspots, would one or both of you be available right now to talk about that hotspot, how those are provided by co-ops or facilitated by co-ops?
Kevin?
Yes.
This is Nancy Hutchinson, KEDC. We have offered our hotspots in our area to the local schools because we've got about 6 school districts that we cover in Ashland, and then we've also offered it in Lexington. But the device that David Couch was referring, KEDC can actually put those in and place those hotspot devices for the area, for schools or the areas, the community. That was what I was referring.
Kevin, this is Dave Johnson with Southeast South Central. We have a grant that we've been involved with the past 3 or 4 years with the University of Kentucky that has allowed us to use hotspots in some of our districts on a research project that they were a partner in. And we've been talking with the vendor that was working with us on that about trying to set something up for our districts. So that's the approach that we're taking in our area.
Great, thank you.
Kevin, Kennedy made a comment that we cannot forget the issue of overall screen time per kid to be, whoops, wait a minute. It jumped on me. Concern that also needs to be addressed is on the number of devices and students in a house and the time spent for each student online. Yeah, that's for sure. I deal with that one.
And related to that, I think it was Eric Kennedy mentioned up in the chat about the death by 1,000 passwords. A lot of parents run into issues with multiple schools are using multiple platforms, and I'm sure that issue is multiplied by the number of children you have also, and what grade level. That can be, I know, very daunting.
The other thing, Kevin, we're working on for districts is just to help them out with, and it's even for KD staff that we're looking at doing this for, is how to manage your own Wi-Fi in your house. Because what I found even at the beginning of the 90s, that most folks don't have a good feel for how much bandwidth they are individually consuming. And so what we're trying to put together just for KD staff and for districts of some guidance, and they don't have to use it, obviously these are words of wisdom, for districts about multiple people using your Wi-Fi in your home. Because it just takes one doing something that takes a lot of audio and video that maybe is not instruction related, that reduces the good experience for people in the home. So that's one of the big things, and I'm all the time here at the house, as most people have gotten used to, is trying to get a feel for what everybody else in the house is doing, and making sure for sure they're not entertainment related, and they're really, focused for a certain period of time so it doesn't degrade everyone's experience. The hotspot devices and services, say there's a variety of techniques, as a co-op could be involved with that for X number of districts of being in the front of acquiring a service that hits a specific area. But kind of keep in mind too, that these are very specific to very specific areas. Just like I mentioned to this family farm in Breathitt County, the AT&T doesn't work there, and there's only Sparta, Sprint does, and Verizon. So it's very specific to and it could be county by county specific of the hotspot service that you're doing. So if you're going to help a district in the business of acquiring hotspot services and putting them in place in the homes, then just kind of keep that in mind.
Thanks, David. Leon Mooninghand commented that we've used mobile hotspots for iLead students for several years with great success. Nancy Hutchinson, could we offer some professional learning for parents to help them out? I'm not sure who that would fall under here at KDE.
Karen, that's actually been a great part of NTI designs in the past. David Cook can probably speak up where, when a district enters into NTI strategies, there are many parent engagements from a professional learning perspective on what that can look like, how to help students get engaged. And I'll also add that definitely consolidating and collapsing what we refer to as a digital workflow with the applications that students are using, minimizing those to the applications that most make sense, but also easy ways to get into those. In other words, not having 1,000 passwords. We see really great models right now. We're actually helping statewide on some of those models with a technique called single sign-on, and that's very successful. Again, eliminating the chaos and confusion is vital.
Yeah, and Karen, I would just add, this is David Cook, that to Marty's point, yes, that's a very integral part of engagement of parents in NTI programming. I think it's important. Nancy's point is well taken. I think that's a really important piece. And you know, we've been in and out with Tanya on the call, and also our friends at the Pritchard Committee have always been great partners around how we engage families. So I think all of us together probably could come up with some really strong opportunities for learning, not professional learning, but parent learning around these different topics that folks have been bringing up.
That's great. Thank you, Marty and David.
Karen, I'd like to ask Commissioner Tackett. He's on the line, and just to give us, while we have all of the parties together, I think it would be helpful for them, and he's offered to give them a brief update on where KHSAA is with questions about summer practice and what that might look like, and what they are thinking and how they're addressing some of those issues. If we have a few minutes, we obviously are running a little bit ahead of schedule. So Commissioner Tackett.
Yes, sir. And I will keep it brief, which is hard for me. A couple of real quick things to let you know. We have been waiting on guidance documents that were just completed over the weekend from the group called the National Federation, which is all of the various state associations. Each state has one group that's responsible for athletics, and as you all know, different states are opening up different non-school things at different times. And what we're trying to do, or what they've tried to do, is create some guidance for the various states. We just got that. Matter of fact, it was released to us Friday night about midnight, and we had a meeting about it right before this. I think we're pretty well up on what's going to go on. I'll be talking to our board, and as a lot of you know, we have a board of control that 17 of the 18 members have a direct school affiliation. 3 are retired teachers, but we also have Kevin and Commissioner Brown and Dave Couch on there, so we've got really a good cross section. What we're going to be laying out is a draft of opportunities that might exist this summer to at least get kids out active. There's a real collision of things here between health people who are pressuring to not do too much too quick. And the other side of it is the health people who are pressuring you to get the kids out and do something because they've been not doing something for quite a while. So this guidance document will not lock us into anything, but some of the questions that our board may be asking you all as leaders of various education groups. We currently have a prohibition on all the use of facilities at any school that's a member, any board-owned facility through the end of May. Now, the original governor's recommendation was that there be no activities on campus through the end of June, but I think we've all seen as different things have happened and different other things have occurred. Some of the things have been reconsidered. Bottom line to tell you, we've been asked to present a plan to the Lieutenant Governor's office and the State Health Office of considerations for local districts to decide if they want to, what they want to do with that. The difference with sport, obviously, is competitive equity between schools is often an issue, not at your level and not at the senior administrative level, but certainly at the coach level. They worry about somebody getting 2 practices more than the other guy. But my point to you all is that by the end of next week, we should have a draft plan that we will be able to circulate to certain groups at the Department of Ed and the Health Department. And I've already been told by the Lieutenant Governor they're going to take that plan and probably cut it up and make some changes. That's what we need, because we all know that they're going to drive a lot of the final answer. We also know, and I've expressed this opinion after listening to both the governor's press conferences and some of your all's discussion, is that in many cases, the local health departments while they do great work, they may not really want to take on the responsibility of answering specific questions about restrictions. And as such, we'll probably, and you all found that out with some of your graduation ceremonies, we will then be able to ask the State Department of Health to help us in those areas. So just wanted you to know that wasn't at all sitting idle. It is a fairly constant moving topic. The advantage that we have in our little niche is we have perhaps a little more time to finalize things than the academic side of the picture. But we greatly appreciate communication. I'll be reaching out to Jim Flynn again to talk a little bit more with some of the superintendents about their thoughts, because they obviously have to be comfortable, and we'll reach out to a lot of different groups. But just kind of wanted to be sure that you all knew that I know you're getting asked that locally. The governor, when he made his announcement about the June 15th youth sport, it was a rather interesting announcement, as Kevin and I have talked about. He announced youth sport, but didn't define youth. We have determined through talking to their office that is below middle school. So there's no open allowance for sports June 15th. They're kind of looking to us in collaboration with the Department of Ed, in collaboration with all of our groups, for a good path for local people to consider. He also said it was for outdoor low contact sports. And for those of you that have an athletic background, the words low contact are not involved in sports. So we've had to seek clarity about that. We think we've got a better description for them to use that we submitted with that report today. And thirdly, he did say outdoor, and a number of the media outlets did not report the word outdoor. So you're probably getting, you and your schools and members are probably getting calls about volleyball teams wanting to get in and practice and basketball teams wanting to get in practice. Right now, we have been told that the only thing that's going to potentially be open during this first phase is outdoor activities, low in risk. You know, he said low contact, but I think we're going to work with Dr. Stack on some cleanup there. And then only in a minimal amount of sports. We know that for our member schools, the big struggle is a lot of our schools are used as the facility for parks and recreation or other leagues. So, you know, that are not school based. So we're going to have to work by that day. By the time he gets ready to release the final guidance in the first part of June, we need to have some clear direction for our schools. So just wanted you to know, while you all are working on the most important piece, which is the education piece, we are working behind the scenes and with a lot of our people and trying to get some resolution on sports issues.
Commissioner Tackett, thank you. That's very helpful. I would add that KCTCS and opening up their 16 facilities on a very limited basis for the purpose of lab work and a few other reasons, they probably will be some of the first education-like entities and buildings in the state to open around June 1st, and they've developed a protocol for opening those facilities up in concert with public health. So we've asked to look at that, and obviously we will replicate that. And when we get to that point in some of our facilities, and so that's something you also may also want to take a look at.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Kevin, I know Tanya Crum had something she wanted to address. She sent me through email. She hasn't been able to get on the chat. So I think we can turn it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, the storm rolled through. So I just wanted to share with this group that KET had received some requests from local districts about potentially broadcasting local high school graduation ceremonies. And we have determined that we will be willing to consider broadcasting those for Kentucky public and private high schools. They'd be broadcast on our KET-KY channel, the Kentucky channel of KET, and online. So we've created some guidelines and details about that opportunity. And I think I've sent that link to Karen, so hopefully she'll be able to put it in the chat for you all.
Yep, I just did.
Great. So we're looking for just a letter of intent by the end of May, but then videos don't have to be submitted until the end of June, but we're happy to help districts if they're interested in that opportunity. Thank you. Thanks, Tanya. Commissioner Tackett, your hand is raised. Do you have a comment?
I I do, Karen. That just reminded me of the one last thing that I failed to mention. Superintendents and finance officers, and then with KDE as well. You'll be getting some information about a couple of companies that are already very active in the state. One of the things that's really come to light from the health considerations is the use of paper money at activity events. And there's several electronic alternatives that eliminate that. We're fearful that if we don't get some guidance out about a couple of vendors that have a track record and are safe and have been audited and all this, that our schools are going to be very susceptible to salesmen. And I'll just leave it at that. So we will be getting that out, and that'll be included with that information. I apologize for leaving it out, and thank you, Karen.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts or questions?
Karen, there's a comment by Jim Flynn regarding special ed and compensatory services. May want to flag that for a topic at the next advisory task force meeting.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and post our exit slip here. So a lot of what you see in there, several of you completed this the last time. That we've got questions now pertaining to the topics that we talked about this week. Some of the same guiding questions and a few others are on there this time. So if you wouldn't mind everyone going out and filling that out for us, we would greatly appreciate it. There's always going to be a question on there about topics you think we need to discuss for the next meeting. So if you would complete that, that would be fantastic. That does complete our agenda. Kevin, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Just to remind everyone again that the guidance document, the reopening guidance document, is a living, breathing document. We will have multiple versions of that. It will be indicated at the bottom whether or not it's the most recent version, or it'll at least list the version number, because we do know, as we talked about today, we're going to be layering in additional information as we get it and as it becomes available. More specifics from public health and other entities that will dive down into all the different details about opening school and providing educational services. So that will be an ongoing process throughout the summer. It will take feedback from this group to get it right. So I appreciate your continued attendance. And then to leave you on a positive note, I know we spent a lot of time I'm getting ready for graduation and what the plans were, and then it just seems like once we got that figured out, we moved on to the next problem. But just remind everyone to stop and watch some of these great videos online and the graduation parades that are taking place. And this past Saturday night there was a national celebration that's still available on Primetime Anytime or online, and there's a Kentucky element to that when you go online. And then this Saturday night at 7 o'clock through various, I think the governor's YouTube channel, KDE YouTube channel, and some other sources will be airing the Kentucky's celebration of our graduates. That will include the governor, lieutenant governor, myself, some special music from Kentucky artists, as well as special messages from the chairs of the House and Senate Education Committees. So it's going to be a very special tribute, I think, and very much focused on saluting Kentucky's graduates and the sacrifices they've made. So be looking for that. There'll be more information from the department on how to access that event. Thanks everyone for what you're doing. If we can assist you in any way, please let us know.
David Couch has his hand raised.
One final thing, and I want to make sure, if we haven't talked about hotspots enough, I want to leave this with you. There's different types of hotspots. The ones that we're talking about are the ones that actually go to the home. So, I can talk with the co-op separately, and we gave this guidance out early, is the hotspots you got to keep in mind. You don't want to create something that a bunch of people are gathering around in close proximity. So that's why when we're talking about the hotspot service, we're talking about one that actually goes within the home. And also there was a requirement back in 1998 about the Child Internet Protection Act, along with a state law that was also provided. So it's just not giving them internet access for the students, it's making sure they're staying focused in on instructional things. And there's certain parts of the law that are required for internet content management. So even that's why when we have them come to the schools parking lots, is they're actually using the Wi-Fi of the school building for the students and not for the general adult population. So make sure as you're taking a look at strategy, we're talking about hotspots in the same way. Is you're talking about one that goes in the home and not just a general place where people gather, which is a social distancing issue, but also the one that doesn't make sure that they're going to the right place. And we have a service called Lightspeed to make sure it does the internet content management the way that the law, both the federal and state law require. So I'll end you on some hotspots there.
Great. Moral of the story is don't let your hotspot become a COVID-19 hotspot. All right. Thanks, everybody. And feel free to, in your exit slips, please make sure that you, if there's something you didn't want to say out loud, please put it there. We take all of that feedback and also additional items that you think we need to address in the future. Everybody have a great day and a great rest of the week. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.